Hey,
Good evening.
good evening. It's
Yeah.
Doug and Janet Newberry. There is great hope.
Thank
And
you
we
for
are
joining us
coming
tonight.
to you from the Fredericksburg RV Park. Yes, that is Freedom right behind us.
And we could, because we're coming to you from Fredericksburg RV Park, we could be interrupted in 100 different ways.
We could be. Hi, Tina.
And if so, we may wind up introducing you to our neighbors or their dogs or
Who knows what? I think it's
It-
Tuesday night in Fredericksburg. We could overhear the auction lot. Hi, Catherine.
Yeah.
We don't know, but we just decided to brave love it out right here
Yeah.
at the RV park and
get outside.
see how it goes.
Yeah. So
And
anyway,
see how it goes.
Yeah.
So we drove back yesterday from Baton Rouge. It was a 9-hour drive home, which was better than the 11-hour
the
drive
11
there.
going. I guess it's because it's downhill coming back.
Yeah, downhill. We made better time coming home. Thank you, God, there wasn't the same accident that we got stuck in.
Yeah.
But we had a great time in Baton Rouge.
It was.
Hi, Ellen.
It was incredible.
We had a great time in Baton Rouge. We had a great time with family, and we have a grandbaby there, and we had a great time with Grace Life Fellowship. Got to share with them 3 different times and enjoy worship with them and hear Tim Chalice speak, and it was fun all the way around.
Yeah, thank you guys for loving on us like you did.
Yeah.
It was quite a privilege.
And I'm going to remind you to talk loud since we're outside at the RV park.
Going to do the best I can. She reminds me every time.
And so the title of, we're in a new a series of episodes. If you are looking for the entitlement videos, look on YouTube, Janet Newberry on YouTube. We've moved all 3 parts of the entitlement series onto YouTube. So those were fun. And this question, that is the reason we're starting this new series. It's a question from Baton Rouge, and it's
Yeah.
honestly the question that we get asked almost more than any other. Hi, Kathy.
It's at least in
Hi,
the
Lori.
top 3.
Yeah, we always get asked, what do we do when kids struggle?
Always.
And this one is related to that.
yeah.
What does love have to say about consequences? And so the title of today's episode,
Look up, child. What does brave love say about consequences?
what do we do with consequences? And it's so interesting because we're conflicted, we're confused, because I posted something, I don't know if it was last night or this morning, I posted something on Facebook, and I've posted similar things and had the same response. If I post something like what I'm about to read to you, people share it, people love it, people respond to it. It pulls to something in our very heart and in our DNA. And this is what the popular Facebook post said. It said, respond to children with love in their worst moments, their broken moments, their angry moments, their selfish moments, their lonely moments, their frustrated moments, their inconvenient moments, because it is in their most unlovable human moments that they need to experience love. And we all just rally around those kinds of words. We share them, we love them. It pulls to something deep inside of us. And at the same time, we back off and go, but wait a minute. When it's our kids being angry, what about consequences? When it's our kids being selfish, what about consequences? What does it mean to respond to your children with love, and what does love say about consequences? And because we want to be helpful, we want them to know the truth, and sometimes it's harmful. The word consequences can be both helpful and harmful.
Well, the first thing you feel when you hear the word consequence is, this is not going to be good for me, especially if you're the one, well, either if you're the one giving the consequence or the one receiving the consequence.
So, and sometimes as parents, we give consequences not to help our children, but to control them, to control their behavior. And so we really want to spend just a minute talking to you about why we chose Look Up, Child as part of the title here.
Yeah.
I think I choked on a bug.
There's plenty here, and they seem to come out right at dark.
So Lauren Daigle's hot new album right now, her new CD that's out, is entitled Look Up Child. And you've probably shared or looked or liked or listened to the number one song on that album. It's called You Say, right? Look up, child. And the You Say lyrics start like this: I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that says that I will never measure up. Am I just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. And that's why we picked it. That's why we picked Look Up, Child for the main title, and the subtitle, What Does Brave Love Say About Consequences? Because look up, child, means look up to your parents to see the truth of who you are.
When I thought about this, the whole act of looking up, when I'm looking down, I'm usually hiding, or I'm entertaining shame, or something. I'm in isolation, and I'm not really doing anything to get to the root of it.
Or to access help.
I'm by myself.
Right?
When you look up, whenever you look up, it all of a sudden the world opens up, and you've got your trusted community there, or as a child, their parent.
You look up to your parents, and this is for us. And as parents, we look up to God, and we stand in that place for them to tell them who they are, because this is very true. Behavior is always the mirror of belief. Yeah. If you want to know what I'm believing to be true about myself, look at my behavior. If I want to know what I'm believing to be true about myself, what am I doing? Because behavior is the echo of belief. And so we had to start this episode with this whole concept of look up, child, because there is another way to look, and it is to look down. We look up in love, and we look down in fear. We look down in shame. We look down at a screen, right?
Right.
We look down at a glass of wine.
Yeah. Or food, or whatever.
Right. We look down to hide, right? We look down when we have forgotten who we are, right? Our hearts are closed. We look down, and here's the strange thing that happens as parents when we get wrapped up in a performance-obsessed culture, when we are intentionally wanting our children to know the truth. And I'll even risk saying this: we want them to know how the world works, but we teach them how the world is. And how the world is not really how the way the world works, because it's not working very well. The kingdom of love is different from the kingdom of this world, and it's not always based on I get because I earn, or I get because I deserve. In fact, right after dinner when we were washing dishes, we were asking ourselves, can you think of anybody in the Bible that got what they deserved? Either good or bad. It was just, so we're still brainstorming on that one. But this is what happens. We often say to our children, if after you do your homework, you can play Fortnite, right? And so we have assigned them this privilege, which then becomes a consequence. And we justify it and we rationalize it in our own thinking by saying, well, if they do what they need to do, they earn that as a privilege. And what we're giving them as a privilege when it's Fortnite, or when it's dessert, or when it's social time on social media, or whatever it is that they're willing to work for, what we're giving them isn't good for them. It doesn't help them grow up. We're giving them something not created to satisfy, not created to lend strength in the way of love.
We're potentially giving them an addiction.
Exactly. We're giving them access to something that pretty soon we're going to be concerned and even frustrated because they're addicted to what we gave them as a prize, because we thought we needed a consequence to get them to do what they needed to do.
And they thought if I do what I'm supposed to do, I'm okay doing this. And so it's really, the struggle is real.
The struggle is real. And here's the thought. We often give a prize instead of ourselves. We often reward them for doing their homework instead of sitting at the table with them and helping them with their homework. And helping them with their homework is what they need to grow up. That's relationship. That's love. And we don't withhold that because we need. We give that because they need. And so we don't do this crazy stuff on purpose. We get confused because the culture tells us, tell them to move their clip. That's a consequence. But we have to ask ourselves the question, okay, Catherine, I'm going to read that in just a minute. So how would you say it, or what would you do? An alternate practical example is this. When you want your child to do their homework, you can say this: how can I help you do your homework? What do you need help on? Or you can just say, I've got something to do too. I'm going to sit beside you and do it. But what they need is you to lend them strength, not to give them the fear of losing a privilege that's not even good for them. That's not even going to help them in the long run. That's not offering them maturity. It's offering them an addiction or something that is weighing them down, because they get weighed down by the anxiety that comes with, well, I have to do this or I can't get my phone. So, Catherine, I would also have this conversation with them. I would sit with them and untangle this idea that, you know what, we've done something crazy here. And I just want to confess that we've done something crazy. We've linked something that's not even helpful in your life to something that you need to do, when what we really want to give you is help doing the hard thing. We don't want to bribe you to do the hard thing. We don't want to manipulate you to do the thing you don't want to do. We want you to live by conviction, not fear of consequences, and we want you to live in trusted relationships. And so how can I help you, or who will you trust to help you? Can you call a friend and do your homework together? Right? How can relationships lend strength instead of the fear, instead of our children working to avoid consequence? Yes, separate Fortnite from the responsibilities. And actually part 2 of this whole series is going to be about protection and permission. Look up, child, what does Brave Love say about protection and permission? And also this whole idea of what do we as a family believe about technology? When do we get it and when do we don't? And instead of making it a pawn in a chess game and something, or a prize in the lottery, and we're hoping to win it, let's make decisions about these things that we're rewarding our children with based on our convictions.
If the reward is what they're working for, it's separate from relationship, and it goes down the wrong pathway altogether. It's a great intention, and you're hopeful that they do get their work done, and they may.
Right. I'm trying to read Lisa Ewing's question. Is it still a consequence if a child asks, what can I blank? And the parent says, after you blank. Yes, it's still a consequence, because what they are confused about is transactional relationships, and it's perfectly normal for them to be confused because the world tries to convince them that relationships are transactional. And so they're used to earning what they want, even if it's not good for them. Even if it's not what they need. They think, I can get what I want if I earn it. And that makes no sense if what they're trying to earn isn't even good for them. And so if it's if I get because I do, it's a transaction, and it's not going to be helpful. If I get because I need, it's transformational and it's going to be helpful. And so here's the truth about consequences. There's plenty out there, right? There's plenty of consequences. We've experienced the consequence of divorce in earlier relationships. If you text and drive, there's going to be a consequence. Eventually, you're going to have an accident. If you drink and drive, if you eat too much, if you don't do your homework,
There's natural
not going to learn.
consequences.
There's natural consequences abound. Those are the ones we want to help our children with, not to avoid them, but to learn from those natural consequences. We're saying those are the ones that are part of being truthful with your children, because the world is going to hand us enough struggle and enough consequences for our own behavior, consequences for other people's behavior. We're going to endure consequences. We don't have to make them up to control our children's behavior. And when your child says, what can I do to play Fortnite? They're confused about Fortnite, and they're probably confused for a good reason. They're confused about, how do I make decisions about Fortnite? I don't earn something that's not good for me. I mean, I'm going to give you a really ridiculous example, but what if your child came up to you and said, what do I do to earn a glass of wine? What do I do to earn a joint? Right? What do I do to earn? I mean, if it's not good for them, if you only want them to have a little of it or none at all, make a decision about it based on what it is, not based on what they want. And so
they don't have the
these
maturity
things.
yet to step into what they want and separate that from what is good for them.
And here's the real problem with things like Fortnite and addictions and social media and the things that our children, we are rewarding them with, and we're creating these artificial consequences. You don't get this privilege, which isn't even a privilege, but you don't get this privilege because you didn't, and so now that's really a punishment. It's not a consequence. Only natural consequences are really consequences, and punishment doesn't change behavior. And guess what? Fear of consequences doesn't change behavior either. There are prisons full of people who knew better, who knew the consequence to their behavior. There are lots of overweight people that know the consequences of overeating. There are many people who have had wrecks because they were texting and they were drinking. They knew the potential consequences. It didn't help. Knowledge alone isn't enough. This fear presents our children with a level of anxiety that wears them down and that damages our relationships instead of builds trust in our relationships, because now they're confused. They can earn what they want even though it's not something good for them, and that even builds into an addiction, but we're letting them earn it instead of offering it to them in
relationships side by side.
Right.
Or
right. And so we're going to talk about Fortnite again and this whole permission and protection next week on this episode. But I want to tell a story because I want to get to this consequence. One of the most vital consequences of misbehavior, of sin, of doing something wrong is the consequence of damaged relationships, right? When a damaged relationship with myself, which is back to why we called this Look Up Child, right? Because I've forgotten who I am, right? And so now shame is eating away at something it is not supposed to have access to. And blame and judgment and distrust comes into the story. And so I want to tell you a story.
Tim and Amber.
Yes, Tim and Amber. I'm reading Catherine's, spelling it out. Fortnite and dessert are not needs and not necessarily good for us, but are okay and balanced and should not be given as a privilege or reward, but separated. Yes, I can't see more right now. But yes, because we're making decisions about calling them consequences. Well, you get the consequence tonight of not being able to play your computer game or not having access to your phone, when that's really a punishment. That's totally separate from the story. The world has woven it together. We are tired. We're trying to use an external motivator instead of a relationship to get our kids to jump through the hoops they need to jump through. And really what they need is us. Yeah. And to remember who they are.
External motivator may get the job done. It may fill the gap, but number one, it's not going to be deeply satisfying. Number two, it separates you in relationship from your child. Number three, there is no maturity there. All they're doing is a task and hoping to get something, a grade.
Yeah, and when you said something earlier today when we were talking about this, about Look Up Child. when a child looks up and they want us to hand out a prize and we don't get the prize, right? What were the words you said? Because they were so powerful.
I don't remember exactly, but
Uh-huh.
how about this?
Yeah.
When they do look up and they see trusting, loving faces with open arms instead of a finger pointing at them.
A finger pointing, telling them what they didn't do.
Yeah.
That they needed help doing.
Instead-
They didn't need a bribe. They
Ins-
didn't need fear.
Instead of, I'm with you, I'm here with you, and gosh, man, what a mess this is, but I'm going to sit with you in this. And instead of, gosh, man,
You
I
didn't
told
get
you,
it. I told you,
you
and you
know
didn't
better.
earn it. And so, what we're trying, many times, the artificial consequences we're offering our children are causing a transactional fear-based relationship with us, and it's destroying trust. So maybe this story will help. When I was head of school before, and I've changed the names in this story, but I'm going to tell you a story about Tim and Amber, all right? 5th graders. We'd gone to the track for their physical conditioning class. We'd gone to the track, and these guys Tim and Amber were friends. I mean, they got along just fine. And I don't remember exactly what triggered this bad behavior from Tim, this sin, this misbehavior from him, but maybe it was because Amber was going to beat him across the finish line on the last lap or something. Probably. But what happened was he shoved her. He pushed her down. And she skinned her knee. Her feelings were hurt. Her knees were hurt. And he felt terrible, but he also felt embarrassed, and she felt embarrassed. And so
the shame.
The typical response to that is, well, he deserves a consequence. And so here is the discussion that happened was, we of course took care of Amber in that moment, but I had this conversation with Tim. I knew him well. He's a great kid, makes lots of good choices. I mean, it was just something that happens to 5th grade boys, right? And I talked to him. It was the end of the school day, and I said, what do you think? What's going to help in this situation? What's going to help you learn from this? And one question that we talked about like a week later was, where did that come from? He wasn't ready for it the first day, the day of the offense, but that was a conversation we needed to have. But what I wanted him to think about is, how are you going to restore this relationship? Because there's the real consequence. There's the natural consequence. It was that this relationship that had been whole was now broken, and trust was broken. And so the first thing out of the 5th grade boy's mouth was, well, I think maybe I should just miss recess for a week. And I know where he got that idea from, right? It's an artificial consequence, and we often tell kids, you sit out at recess, move your clip, move your color. You don't get computer games tonight. You don't get to do what you want to do because you misbehaved. And my response to him was, I want you to go home and think about this, Tim, and we're going to talk about it again tomorrow, because you missing recess does nothing to restore your faith in your identity and does nothing to restore the relationship between you and Amber. And this is what he came back and said to me the next day. This was a school where we didn't have a custodial staff. It was a private school, and the children did all of the chores in the school. They cleaned the bathrooms, they mopped the floors, they pulled the weeds, they cleaned the windows and the doorknobs, and everyone had an assigned chore. And when Tim went home and thought about how could he restore his relationship, because there was the consequence of the misbehavior, right, was a loss of relationship, not a loss of recess. And he said, you know what I want to do? I want to do her chores for a week. And so I gave him some words. We talked about how he could communicate with her. And I wish I'd recorded this conversation between this 5th grade boy and this 5th grade girl, because he went to her and he said, Amber, I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't done that. And more than that, I want to restore our relationship. I want to build the trust back again. And he said, so I want to do your chores for you for a week. I'm going to do my chores, and I want to do your chores too. You can use that extra time any way you want. Go enjoy being outside, go get a head start on your homework, but I just want to do something to help you know that I'm for you, and that I like you, and that I care about you, and that I'm really desiring to rebuild this relationship.
Can you imagine what Amber was thinking at this time?
And it was beautiful. It was good for Tim because it reminded him he was acting like his real self. And it was good for their relationship, and it was good for Amber. And so much more than the consequence of missing recess was the consequence of missing out on relationship. And so too often we make our decisions about behavior with our children, we focus on the messing up. We don't focus on the missing out. And we are created to live a full and free life in trusted relationships, and we don't want to miss out. And that's what happens when we don't behave responsibly as our real self. So how do we tell children, look up? Look up. Let's remember who you are. You're someone who cares, not someone who pushes, right? And later we talked about where that came from, and that was a trusted conversation too. But
this conversation, it's not that easy to just flip that switch and all of a sudden this is now the language of the home. But these are ideas just to give you some
we have
place
another
to start.
we have another story about Tim that we're going to share with you next week. This was a great kid, and just amazing stories about helping him navigate life's struggles, because that's what we're helping kids do. Not with consequences that were artificial, but with consequences that were about relationship, about rebuilding trust, about restoring relationship, and about reminding him who he was. And that's really the whole point. We don't want our children to miss out on the truth and the natural consequences of life. But we've got to admit to ourselves that artificial consequences are not helping them grow up.
Artificial consequences are the same as punishment. And if we focus on the punishment, there's bugs.
Yeah, lots of bugs.
if we focus on that, we're focusing on what's already happened instead of where we want to go with this child. And in natural consequences, you can't avoid those. That's going to be a piece of it anyway. Sit with them in the natural consequences
and remind them who they are and protect
Right.
them from shame. But don't imposing artificial consequences is a way of trying to control behavior. And I'll just say this, if controlling behavior was a good idea, then the cross of Christ was a waste. If we could control our behavior, then Jesus didn't need to do what Jesus did. And we didn't get what we deserved. Instead, we got a new identity, and now to remind our children who they are and help them grow up in the ways of loving one another, it is a gift that is better than giving them Fortnite because they did their homework. And so I'm reading this comment.
from Lisa.
Yeah. Yes, Lisa, I'm going to come back to that. I see the word permission, and our next Facebook Live is going to be about permission and protection. So I'm going to read that question and address it in next week's Facebook Live. But let's give them 3 takeaways.
Okay, because
you're going to love these takeaways. They're alphabetical.
I think several people have just come home, and it's about to get noisy.
It's a little crazy in the RV park right now.
It can be. All right, the 3 takeaways. A before B.
A before B. Remember that.
Okay, the A, our children need attention, acceptance, and affirmation before behavior or misbehavior. So they need these things beforehand.
Those are ways that we love our children. A before B. Acceptance, affirmation, attention before the behavior. Give them what they need before they're going to behave or misbehave, because love offers to lend strength, especially in the ways we know our children are weak. We want them to look up for strength, not for prizes, not for things that are not meant to deeply satisfy. We want them to look up, child, for us to remind them who they are and for us to connect in relationships that give them what they need, not what they deserve, especially if they're trying to earn something that's not even good for them.
Number 2.
Yes. T, I can't see your papers too high. T after C. Consequences happen naturally. That's what C stands for. Brave love offers truth. That's what T stands for. About our identity, and it unplugs shame from our struggle when we got to deal with real consequences. So when our children are impacted by real consequences, they didn't make the team, they sat the bench, they failed the test, they got a speeding ticket, they are dealing with a real consequence, not an artificial one, not a way of bribing. That's when we give them truth. T after C. Let's remind them who they are, and let's unplug the shame.
Right, and we don't change the truth for them.
No.
The truth remains the same regardless of what the consequence is leading to.
Don't unplug the truth, but unplug the shame. The cross of Christ dealt with the shame, and only love can deal with shame.
That's one of the biggest things I've ever really realized is if you unplug the shame from the situation, there's room for healing.
There's room for healing. There's room for growth. There's room for restoration. And here's the last takeaway.
Yeah, remind them who they are. But
Yeah.
L
in the middle.
Yeah, L in the middle. Misbehavior hurts and damages trust in relationships. Brave love offers restoration to relationships.
So love in the middle of the mess, in the mess of their misbehavior. And we go back to the Facebook post that says that everybody loves and then gets confused about. Respond to children with love in their worst moments, because they're going to need you to remind them who they are, to unplug shame, to lend them strength, to tell them that you're always there with them, that it's not about their behavior.
The guilt is already there.
Oh, yeah.
Don't throw the shame in. Protect
Right.
them from the shame.
And so I know this is a lot, and it is parenting by design, not by default. Because by default, we are trying to control our children's behavior with artificial consequences, and we are convinced we have been lied to. We have, just like that snake in the garden. Are you sure? Are you sure? Right? He's saying, this is the way the world works. You need to teach them the way the world works. Guess what? The way the world is not the way the world works. Love is the way the world works. So let's teach them the strength that love offers. Let's teach them the freedom that love offers, and let's teach them the truth that love offers too. But we don't have to impose artificial consequences. Let's just help them deal with the truth that already exists.
This whole consequence thing is just so
Yeah.
thick. I could go on for many episodes.
One of the things I'm most excited about is that people are actually posting questions this time. It gives us something to read before we do this again next Monday night.
Yeah.
And so if you have other questions, or if you're watching this video when it's not live, post your questions too, because we want to get practical with you. And if you want to get practical a different way, then join us in one of our mini online classes. You'll always have access to us online.
Yeah, we have these conversations daily,
Yeah.
and it's with people from around the world that come and just, it's a safe place to have discussions about hard things.
And guess what? We don't give you artificial consequences,
And you
we
don't
help
get a
you,
grade.
and we help you unplug shame from the struggle that you're bringing to the discussion board. We all need safe places to be loved like that. And so go to janetnewberry.com and see. You can also, Brave Love Podcast comes out every Wednesday.
Right.
If you want to learn more about this life by design instead of by default, we just say join us. And so thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, and have a
Thanks
great
for your
week.
questions. Yeah,
Yeah,
there
you
is
bet.
great hope.
Good night, folks.
Good night.